Well, the UN means two things, first of all. It means its member states. That's 193 countries. And then there is the UN system of organizations and agencies and so forth. The real political base of the UN is its members. And in two senses, there's the General Assembly, which includes all countries, one country, one vote. And then there's the Security Council. The Security Council is where war and peace issues are supposed to be addressed. There are 5 permanent members of the Security Council, each with a veto: the US, Russia, China, France, and the UK, and then 10 rotating countries for a total of 15. So when we say the UN should do more, the answer to my mind is yes. But that means several different things. It means the member states, it means the UN Security Council, it means the leadership of the UN, it means the UN agencies. The UN was established to end the scourge of war. Obviously, it can't do that by itself, and it doesn't do that by itself, but it is the core purpose. It was invented by our greatest president in the United States in our history, Franklin Roosevelt, for the purpose of surmounting the underlying reasons for World War II and World War I, the geopolitics, the arms races, the lack of global rule of law. And so ending wars, making peace is the core business. I'm in another part of the UN activities, which is economic development, and that's important. And also the human rights side is important, but the core of the UN is about peace. And I think the UN till today is not doing enough in all of those contexts to end this war. Now, what we hear from the rhetoric in our mainstream media in the United States is, well, Putin is a Hitler, and he has to be stopped, and we have to defeat him. And it's as simple as that. And there's no talking to him. The man is crazed, living in a dream world of Russian imperialism. There's no stopping him. Any agreement is to rip up a piece of paper. I can tell you, since I'm an old guy now, 67, I've lived through this characterization. Every decade, there's a new Hitler that we can't deal with, whether it was Ho Chi Minh or whether it was Vietnam or whether it was Cambodia or Laos or Nicaragua, for heaven's sake, or Iraq or Syria. We are real good at this game of rhetoric, but this is not real. And since I am all over the world, virtually all the time, speaking with world leaders, what we hear in our media is propaganda. It is not real. We should be negotiating. Actually, Biden refused to negotiate with Putin in 2021 because Putin raised a very specific set of points. One was NATO enlargement. And then there's a chorus here that says, oh, that's a phony issue. That's a red herring. That's fake. That's not fake. I've been in this issue since 1990, when the West promised Gorbachev no NATO enlargement. We're liars. I'm sorry to put it that way. We cheated. We continue to do this. And then Biden refused to negotiate. Okay, that's straightforward, except it's not the way the story is told. Then there is the question of Ukraine itself, which is an ethnically divided country because there is a significant Russian minority. And those are real issues, by the way, although war is not an answer to them in any sense. But there was a very complicated, very difficult conflict where the U.S. was stirring the pot also back in a decade ago, and especially around 2014 and 2015. And there were actually agreements reached for the area where the fighting is raging right now, for the Donbass region. And the agreements were called the Minsk I and Minsk II agreements. They were signed by the Ukraine government. And then the government said, no, we don't want to do those. And when Putin says, well, what about the Minsk agreements? He is shouted down or ignored. No, they don't exist. They were unfair. They were this, they were that. They were actually agreements. When I say this, I can only tell you how many emails I'm going to get from Ukrainian Canadians, Ukrainian Americans. Sachs, are you crazy? What are you saying? But the truth is, diplomacy is crucial if you're going to avoid wars. Signing agreements matters. You can't just walk away from them. That's true of Russia, I'm the first to say. It's true of Ukraine also. It's true of the United States also. And so we actually should be sitting down and negotiating. And all of our media don't discuss substance of what this war is really about, or what its roots are, or even what the claims of Putin are. Just say repeatedly, he's Hitler, he's a madman, he's out of control, there's nothing to do but defeat him. That's our mantra. That kind of mantra can get us all killed if we go down this road, because it's false and it's extraordinarily dangerous. Because, like it or not, we don't like it, but Russia has 1,600 active nuclear warheads, and we don't even want to sit down to talk. And shame on our government not to have diplomacy with Russia. At least sit, talk, discuss, and explain. We don't do that. We just say victory, victory, victory on the battlefield. Well, I'm not in it for that, because this is a very dangerous and very unwise approach.
It's incredibly destructive, and escalating this crisis is, as you mentioned, it only gets scarier, more damaging, and more destructive from there. So what would a reasonable outcome be from your perspective? What, if you're President Zelensky, what would you accept to get to a peaceful resolution to what's going on now?
This agreement was actually on the table back in the end of March, and then Ukraine walked away from it, from what I understand, because the U.S. told them walk away from it. We're providing the weapons, and the U.S. and even more the U.K., which is a more experienced empire than the U.S. and has a mindset, even though it's the empire is long gone, but they still have a imperial mindset that is even more imperial than our mindset. They said to the Ukrainians, don't negotiate. You don't have to. Just beat them on the field. So what was on the table at the end of March was basically neutrality for Ukraine, so that NATO and Russia wouldn't be right up against the border with each other, which is incredibly dangerous. Because if you have the two forces right up against each other, you are in a tripwire of nuclear war. We should have a zone where we're apart, where there's some time to talk, some time to work out problems for deconfliction. But no, we wanted to be right up against the border. But what Zelensky said back in the end of March was neutrality. Neutrality with guarantees. Okay, that's a very valid issue. How is that neutrality going to be protected? But that was point one. Point two was something on the Donbass. Even I said, okay, Minsk I, Minsk II were signed. You can't just walk away from those agreements. You have to do something about them. The third, which is everybody, by the way, on the inside acknowledges there's no answer, is Crimea. Because Crimea is a really weird story of Russia's seaport on the Black Sea, its naval base in Sverdlovsk, So fundamental for Russian security. But Khrushchev in 1954, of course, in what was then a completely symbolic gesture, when the Soviet Union had administrative lines that were within an overall state. He said, okay, we gift Crimea from Russia to Ukraine. It didn't mean anything when there was a Soviet army and Soviet naval base and all the rest. But after 1991, it certainly meant something. And what happened in 2014 was the pro-Russian president was overthrown. Russia views that as a US instigated coup. There is something to that, I know, actually. But again, this is one of those things that the Western media simply will not discuss. And it's so deeply hidden in classified documents that maybe in 50 years, someone will write a good book about Ukraine 2014 if we get to 50 years from now. But in 2014, the Russian President Yanukovych was overthrown. And at that moment, Putin seized Crimea. And there was a referendum, hard to know much about it, but Crimea became part of Russia. Okay, just to say 3 issues on the table, neutrality, the Donbass, and Crimea. And Crimea, the basic answer was, oh my God, okay, we continue to negotiate, it's a frozen conflict. The Donbass, something like the Minsk agreements and neutrality. And then the government of Ukraine walked away from this, even after reports that there was close to an agreement. Then we have our defense secretary and our State Department, which used to be diplomats, but now it's warriors, saying we're going to defeat Russia. And so everything went away about the negotiations. So that's the long-winded answer to your question, that we weren't so far from actually having a negotiated outcome. And then Ukraine walked away, I think, under the instigation of the United States.